Hello, Algebra 1! Quick thing before we get started on this video. If anything from the last section is still a bit fuzzy, if you're still not quite sure about that, pause this video, step away from this video, send me an email, let me know, and we'll go over more of that, because this is that, but even harder. Because we're throwing in an a in front of the x squared. So if anything from the last section was still fuzzy, let me know and we can do more of that before we go on to this. If you're still here, I'm assuming it's good. Okay, so today we're looking at what we were doing in the last section, but we're going to have something in front of our x squared. So like what we were doing, but a bit trickier. So let's say we got something like this. Let's say we've got a 5x squared plus a 27x plus 10. Now, all of that stuff that we said before about if you have two positives, you're going to end up with two positive factors. If you have a positive and a negative, you're going to have one of each. If you have negative, negative, you have one of each. If you have a negative and then positive, you'll have two, but they're both negative. All that stuff we said in the last video is still true. So if all of this is positive, we're still looking for two positive things. So I'm going to make two positive factors here. But instead of this being an x and an x, that was what we had last time because we wanted to end up with an x squared. This time, we've got a 5x squared. So if I'm... Oh, I got marker all over my hand. Okay, so if I'm looking for things that are going to multiply to a 5x squared, instead of an x and an x, I'm going to have a 5x and an x. Now this time I can say that for sure because your only factors of 5 are 1 and 5. If your first number has more factors than that, it gets a bit trickier, but for right now, our only options are 1 and 5 or 5 and 1. Because when we're factoring, we're just looking for whole numbers, so we don't want to get into, okay, well, 2 times 2.5 would give me 5. Yes, it would, but we're not going to deal with that right now. We're just looking for whole numbers that are going to give us 5. So your only options right now are 1 and 5. Boom, that's it. Now, nicely, your only options for factors of 10, and this is the reason we started with a nice one, your only options for factors of 10 are either 1 and 10 or 2 and 5. Now, up until now, we've been saying we're looking for numbers that are going to multiply to this and add up to that. You might notice if you're looking at 1 and 10 and 2 and 5, neither of those things is going to add up to 27. Because we've either got 11 or we've got 7 here. Neither of those is 27. The reason that's okay and this is still going to factor is when we FOIL this back out, we're not actually adding these two things. That worked last time because the things in front of our x's were just ones. So we could just add these two things and get our middle number. This time, when we FOIL this, your 5x squared is coming from these two. But when we take our outside, we're really taking whatever we put here times 5. So what we're really doing is we're going to try to get close to 27 by taking one of these things times 5. Now, if it's jumping out at you right away that, oh, 5 times 5 gives me 25, that's really close to 27, great. If not, we can go through and look at these and say, okay, well, 5 times 1 would give me 5, that's not close. 5 times 2 would give me 10, that's not close. 5 times 10 would give me 50, that's way over. So 5 is probably the one that we want. Now, something with a nice small number of factors like this, you can do like that with kind of guess and check what would get me close. And then 5 went with the 2, so our other thing is a 2. And again, we can double check that by going back and FOILing it and saying, okay, well, 5 times x gives me the 5x squared that I wanted. 5 times 5 gives me 25x. 2 times x gives me a 2x. 2 times 5 gives you 10. So there's your 5x squared. When we add these two together, we've got our 27x, and there's our 10. So, same sort of thing as last time in that any of them, you can check by going back and foiling and seeing, does that give me the thing I started off with? If it does, you did it right. Now, that worked out pretty nicely because our only options for factors of 5 were 1 and 5. We really only had two pairs of options for 10. It was either 1 and 10, 2 and 5. I'm going to show you another way to do this, even though this one was pretty nice without it. I'm going to show you one that uses this method with one that's nice, so that when we get into ones that aren't so nice, we know what we're doing. So I'm going to erase this for a moment, and then we're going to draw a box. Told you the box would be back. So when we were foiling, we said that we could put our things that we were foiling outside of a box here and multiply on the inside. So if I had something here like an x plus 3 and an x plus 2, we could multiply and get our foiling that way. Now we're going to go backwards. So I'm going to put that 5x squared and that 10 in two corners of your box. Technically, it doesn't matter which two corners. I like to use these two just because we tend to read from left to right. So I'm going to put my first thing here, my last thing here. You can put them in any two corners as long as they're going diagonal. So either these two or those two. Cool. Now, we're going to multiply those two things. So I'm going to take that 5x squared times that 10. That's going to give me a 50x squared. I'm going to stick that out here. And then what I'm going to do is I'm going to look for factors of that 50 that are going to give us that 27. Now, because we already went through this example, it might be jumping out at you right away. Well, 2 and 25 give you 50, and those add up to 27. Cool. If those aren't jumping out at you, same sort of thing we were doing with the factors before, just go ahead and start listing them off starting with 1. So 1 and 50 would give me 50. 2 and 25. 3 doesn't go into 50. 4 doesn't go into 50. 5 does. So 5 and 10. 6 doesn't. 7 doesn't. 8 doesn't. 9 doesn't. 10 does, but we've already got it. And once you've got a repeat, you know you've got all your factors. So those are our options. So then we're looking for which of those things is going to give us 27. And boom, it's that one. So I'm going to take that 2 and that 25. And we're going to put an X with them. And then what we're looking for is, with our box, we're looking for the biggest thing, the biggest term that we can factor out of, I'm having trouble with my marker, that we can factor out of each row and each column. So if I'm looking at this row, I'm looking for what goes into both of those. So if I have a 5x squared and a 2x, nothing really goes into 5 and 2 except 1. So the only thing that actually goes into these two is an x. I'm going to take that, I'm going to stick it out here. Now we're going to do the same thing with the bottom. So we've got a 25x and a 10. 25 and 10, the biggest thing, so we're looking for the biggest thing that goes into both of those. And the biggest thing is going to be a 5. Sometimes there might be more than one thing that goes into your numbers. If there's more than one thing, you're looking for the biggest number that goes into both of them. And now we're going to do the same thing, but with the columns. So I'm going to take this column here. And if I have a 5x squared and a 25x, 5 goes into both 5 and 25. And both of those things have an x. 2 goes into both 2 and 10. This one has an x, that one doesn't, so the x isn't coming out. So that is going to be an x plus 5 and a 5x plus 2. And you may be going, Miss P, that's how we got up here. Yes, it is. Because if we're multiplying, order doesn't matter, so 5x plus 2 times x plus 5 is the same thing as x plus 5 times 5x plus 2. So either this or this, if we're multiplying, order doesn't matter. Now, if you had some negatives in there, it does matter which stuff the negative goes with, but order still doesn't matter. And again, if you're not sure, you can double check by foiling it back. Okay, there's my 5x squared. There's a 2x and a 25x. They give me a 27x. And 5 times 2 is 10. Okay. We're going to try that method with one where your factors aren't quite so nice. So let's say I've got this. Now, the reason you probably don't want to guess and check with this one is 3 would be okay. 3 would be okay. Your only factors of 3 are 1 and 3. But if I'm looking at 24, you've either got 1 and 24, you've got 2 and 12, you've got 3 and 8, you've got 6 and 4. You probably don't want to go through and guess and check all those, see what gets you close to 22. So we're going to stick it in a box. So, box. And my 24x squared and my 3 are what's going here. Now, remember before we said that all that stuff about positives and negatives, that's the same even if I have something like this. So I'm looking for 2 negative factors. So whatever my stuff ends up being here, it's going to be a something x minus something and a something x minus something. So you got to make sure that our pluses and minuses line up to give us a negative here and a positive over here. Okay, so now we're going to take that 24 times 3. 24 times 3 gives you 72. And we're looking for factors of that are going to add up to 22. And we just want to watch out for they're both going to end up being a minus. So we still want them to add up to 22. So factors of 72. Again, if you're getting stuck, start listing them off. Okay, 1 and 72. 2. Does 2 go into 72? And feel free to check your calculator if you're not sure. If you want to know what 2 and what would go into 72, just take 72 divided by that 2, and that'll give you 36. So if you're not sure if something goes in, just double check with your calculator. 3. And same sort of thing with 3. 3 and, well, we got it from 3 and 24 in the first place. So if you happen to notice that 3 and 24 is how we got the 72, well, 3 and 24 has got to be an option. Okay, 4. 4 and 18. And again, if you're looking for what the other number is, just take 72 divided by 4. That'll give you that number. 5 doesn't go into 72 because the only things that 5 goes into are things that end in 5 and 0. 6 goes in there 12 times. 7 doesn't. 8 does. So 8 and 9. And the next biggest thing would be 9, but we've already got the 9, so we can stop listing off factors. So then we're looking for which of those are going to add up to 22. Now, if you happen to know off the top of your head that 4 and 18 gave you 72 and that those add up to 22, if you didn't have to go through and list off all your factors, cool. If you're stuck though, just start listing them off 1, 2, 3, 4 till you get to the thing you're looking for. Okay, and also if you were doing that and you happen to notice as you were making your list that 4 and 18 give you 22, you can stop making your list once you got the thing you're looking for. I went through and listed them all off anyway. So then we got a 4x and an 18x. And we just want to watch out for those are both going to end up being a minus. So whatever we're pulling out of here, that's going to be a minus that. That's going to be a minus that. Okay. So then we're looking for what's the biggest thing that goes into 24 and 18. And remember, we're looking for the biggest thing. So 2 does go into both of them. If you said 2, 2 does go into them, but there's something bigger. 6 is actually the biggest thing that goes into them both. And that gets an X with it. And then if we're looking at this, the biggest thing that goes into 4 and 3, well, 1 does. And sometimes 1 is going to be your biggest thing. And this one doesn't even have an X with it, so that's just going to be a 6x minus a 1. Because there's nothing else we can pull out of both a 4x and a 3. Okay, now we're going to do the same thing with your rows. That's the same color. I put the blue down and grabbed the blue. Okay, so now we're going to do the same thing with our rows. We're looking for the biggest thing that goes into 24 and 4. And again, 2 does, 4 is bigger. So we got a 4 and an X that we can take out of both of those. And you may be noticing a pattern here as long as you set it up with your X squared thing here and your constant term, your thing without an X down here. You're going to end up with a something X and a something X in both of these boxes. These things will both have X's, these things will not. So if you're noticing a pattern there, that's good. Okay, and then we're looking for the biggest thing that we can take out of both this 18 and that 3, and that's just a 3. Because nothing bigger than 3 is going to go into 3. So then our two factors are that 6x minus 1 and that 4x minus 3. And again, no order doesn't matter, but they do both have to have that minus there. Cool. Okay, let's do one more of those. Alright, let's see, we got this. So we're going to make our little box again. And again, these numbers are probably small enough that you could just do it with a little bit of guess and check. Only 1 and 3 gives you 3, only 1 and 5 gives you 5. But we're just going to go through and double check and make sure. Okay, now, since we've got a plus here and a minus over here, we know we're looking for, what are we looking for? And I hope you said a positive and a negative, but the bigger one's going to be positive because our number is positive here. So all of that stuff that we were using in the last section with if it's a positive and a negative, you're going to have one of each. That still applies to this stuff. So hopefully you still have that list. If not, just go back to the last video and click on wherever that ended up. So we're going to put our 3x squared and our, I'm going to call it a negative 5 here, just so remember that that's going to end up being a negative. Okay, and then we're going to multiply those. 3 times 5 is 15. And we're looking for factors of 15, and since we want this to be a minus, we're looking for factors of 15 that are going to subtract to give me 7. Okay, but really my only factors of 15 are either 1 and 15, 2 doesn't go into 15, 3 does, 3 and 5, 4 doesn't, and then my next biggest thing is 5. Now, you may notice if you're looking at those, 1 and 15 isn't going to give me 7. 3 and 5 isn't going to give me 7, whether we're adding or subtracting them. So, if you've got something like this where none of your things are going to work, those we call prime. So, if you can't factor it, it's prime. So, if you're looking at some of the problems going, Miss P, this isn't actually possible, I can't do this, you're right. One of them you can't. One of the ones on the homework is prime. No, I'm not going to tell you which one. So there should be one that's prime, so if you get to it and you're going, I don't think this one's possible, there's one where it's not. So that's okay. If you get more than one that's not possible, something went wrong. Now, we said at the start that this was solving ax squared plus bx plus c equals 0. So now we're going to throw that 0 back on, but same idea. So we're still doing the same thing, it's just we're adding on that bit that we were doing in the last section, where if it equals 0, one of your two things is going to have to equal 0. So if we put this in a box, and this one we're probably definitely going to want to put in a box because we've either got 1 and 8 or 2 and 4 that would give you 8, and either 1 and 27 or 3 and 9 that would give you 27. So if something is jumping out at you right away, cool. If not, stick it in a box. And again, they're both going to be negative because we want a minus here and a positive here. So two negatives are going to give me that negative when we're adding and positive when we're multiplying. So 8x squared here, 27 here, and I'm not going to do 8 times 27 in my head. That's not the calculator. There we go. 8 times 27 gives you 216. So, factors of 216. And this is where the listing comes in handy because you probably don't know off the top of your head what are some factors of 216. I don't know off the top of my head most of my factors of 216. So, we're just going to start going. So, 1 and 216. 2 goes into there because it's even, so 2 and 108. Again, if you're not sure 2 and what, just take that 216 divided by 2. That'll give you your other factor. 3 and 72. 4 and 54. 5 doesn't. 6 does. 6 and 36. Now, if you're going through and you happen to see, oh, that's going to give me 42, yay. If not, and you kept going and said, well, I've got 8 and I've got 27, and I've got 9 and I've got 9 and 24, 10 doesn't, 11 doesn't, 12 does, 12 and 18, 13 and 14, 15 and 16, 17 and 18, 19 and 20, 21 and 22, 23 and 24, 25 and 26, 27 and 28, 29 and 30, 31 and 32, 33 and 34, 35 and 36, 37 and 38, 39 and 40, 41 and 42, 43 and 44, 45 and 46, 47 and 48, 49 and 50, 51 and 52, 53 and 54, 55 and 56, 57 and 58, 59 and 60, 61 and 62, 63 and 64, 65 and 66, 67 and 68, 69 and 70, 71 and 72, 73 and 74, 75 and 76, 77 and 78, 79 and 80, 81 and 82, 83 and 84, 85 and 86, 87 and 88, 89 and 90, 91 and 92, 93 and 94, 95 and 96, 97 and 98, 99 and 100, 101 and 102, 103 and 104, 105 and 106, 107 and 108, 109 and 110, 1 And I think that's it as far as factors. 13, 14, 15 doesn't, 16 doesn't, 16 doesn't, 16 doesn't. Okay, so that's it as far as factors, so yay. If you happen to stop, where did my 42 go? If you happen to stop here because you realized that was going to give you 42, you can save yourself a little bit of factoring time. So you got a 6x and a 36x that are going to give us that 42. I'm just going to get rid of these factors down here. So more factors, kind of a pain in the neck there, but same idea. Okay, so now we're looking for the biggest thing we can take out of our rows. So you got an 8x squared and a 6x. So again, this one's going to have an x with it. This one's going to have an x with it. These two aren't, as long as you put your x squared here and your constant term over here. So 8 and 6, biggest thing that goes into both of those is 2. Biggest thing that goes into both 36 and 27. Anybody say 9? Okay, so we got a 9. And then we've got the biggest thing that goes into both 8 and 36, and that's going to be 4. And the biggest thing that goes into both 6 and 27 is going to be 3. Now, if you're looking at your numbers going, I'm not quite sure I got the biggest thing. Is that really the biggest thing that goes into both of them? One thing you can do to double check is your things on the outside of your box should multiply to the things that are inside your box. So this 2x times this 4x is going to give me this 8x squared. 4x times that 9 gives you a 36x. So if this number times this number gives us what's in this box, you got the biggest thing. And then that 2x times 3 gives us a 6x. And 9 times 3 gives you 27. So your stuff on the outside should multiply to the stuff on the inside. Okay. Now, we've got a 4x minus 3. And a 2x minus 9. And that equals 0. So, same sort of thing we were doing before with, okay, if this stuff equals 0 and I'm multiplying these, then either a 4x minus 3 equals 0, or a 2x minus 9 equals 0. So now we're just solving these. Now, before we could use that trick where it's just the opposite of whatever's in this box, but I told you if we have something in front of our x, that trick doesn't work. So now we're just going to solve these. So we're going to add a 3. We got a 4x equals 3. We're going to divide both sides by 4. So either x is 3/4. If you want to leave it as 3/4, that's fine. If you want to call that a 0.75, that's also fine. And then over here we've got a 2x minus 9 equals 0. I'm going to add 9. I'm going to add 9. Those go. And we're going to divide by 2. And we got 4.5. And there we go. So once we're here, it's the same sort of thing we were doing before. We're taking this, setting it equal to 0, taking that, setting it equal to 0, and we're good. Okay, one more of these. Okay, this one has smaller numbers, I promise. Okay, but I did want to go through one where it wasn't 0 on the other side. So if it's not 0 on the other side, the big thing is remembering that there's a thing you have to do first. So first thing we're going to do before we do anything with making a box or multiplying or anything, we're going to subtract this 5 over here. Those are gone. So we got a 2x squared plus a 3x minus 5 equals 0. And really the big thing there is just remembering that that's a thing you need to do. So that does need to be a negative 5 rather than a positive 5, and it does need to be over here. So the big thing there is just realizing that that's a thing. Okay. And if you want to stick it in a box, that's fine. This one we could probably do without sticking in a box because that's a positive 2. As only factors of that are 1 and 2. Only factors of 5 are your 1 and 5. So you could probably do this without boxing it. If you want to see an example of me boxing it, just let me know in the comments and I'll make another little video of a box. So the only way to get a 2x squared is with a 2x and an x. Now, when you're doing that, you could either go 2x and x or x and 2x, but I'm not going to put the pluses and minuses in yet because we have one of each and we don't know which one. So if we've got a positive here and a negative here, the only way to get that is by having a positive and a negative. Now, your only factors of 5 are 1 and 5. So this is either a 1 and a 5, or this is a 5 and a 1. And we know one of them is going to be negative. So if I put my 5 here, I'm just going to pencil that in for the moment. If I put a 5 here and a 1 here, and we FOIL that out, we've got a 2x times that 5 when we have the outside. So that's a 10x, that's a 1x. I'm not going to get a 3x out of that. So we know that's not the one we want, which only leaves this as an option. Now, the question is, what do we do with the positive and the negative? Because we want to end up with a positive 3. So I want to put that positive where we're going to get the bigger term when we FOIL it back out. That's not always the thing that has your biggest thing with the x. This time it happens to be because if we put the plus here and the minus here, that gives us a positive 5x and a negative 2x. So this time that worked out. That's not always going to happen. And we get rid of this. And again, any of these, including ones with funny positives and negatives, feel free to FOIL them back and see if you got the thing that you started with. And then the last thing we're going to do is say either 2x plus 5 equals 0 or x minus 1 equals 0. And we're going to go ahead and subtract a 5. Those are gone. We're going to divide by 2. Negative 5 divided by 2 is negative 2.5. And we're going to add a 1 over here. Now this one you could just use a little trick where it's the opposite of whatever is here because that is just an x. So we got x equals 1, and then those are our answers. Now, quick thing you're going to see in the book, if you see the term solution set and then you see a bunch of numbers in brackets, technically your solution set here is 1 and then also a negative 2.5, and no, it doesn't matter which order those are in. So if you're looking at the last problem on the homework, which is, hang on, that's number 47. So if you're looking at 47 going, what are all these numbers doing in brackets? That's just another way of writing this. No, you don't have to do that. Just a heads up that if you double check your answers in the back of the book and see something like this, that's what that is. Those are your two answers. This is your x equals 1. This is your x equals negative 2.5. That's all that is. So don't freak out because it's in brackets. That's just saying this is my set of numbers where this works. All right. So I know these are kind of long. Again, if the last thing was fuzzy, let me know before you jump into this stuff, because this stuff is the last stuff with more stuff. If you're having trouble with stuff on the homework, let me know. I know this is a little bit tricky. I'm sorry this happened to be the thing that was going on when we ended up going to online stuff. The rest of the classes worked out pretty well where it was stuff that it was easier to explain online. This stuff just has a lot of steps. So if you're getting stuck, don't feel bad. Feel free to let me know and we'll do more of this stuff before going on to the next thing. Alright, go ahead and give the homework a try. Let me know if you have questions. Let me know if you're ever having problems. And don't feel bad. This is, we're getting into the harder stuff in Algebra 1. This was just really bad timing on the coronaviruses. But hey, we'll get through it. If you're having trouble, just let me know and we'll go over more of this stuff. Don't feel bad, and I will see you in the next video.